Ooh. Assalamu alaikum, yo. Mideo. What's up, chat? We're back with a react video to the world, outside our worlds. You know what I mean? So, right now we're looking at fentanyl. Now, fentanyl came onto my. I became aware of fentanyl when I was in Cali, and actually found out it was like a really, really huge thing out there. So I was like, they're doing what with the who? It's crazy because they're using fentanyl to like the description of the video says, to like make other stuff better, get people addicted. You know, it's just one of those medicinal. It was like a pharmacy drug that just didn't make the cut, honestly. So let's see, where was I? History. So we're gonna do it using this chili roll guy. You know, he seems like he'd been in the streets, and then we got like some corporate guys. So we're seeing the best of both worlds. You know, we're seeing like society guys, and we're seeing like a real world jungle guy, both speaking on this topic, right? Who is Jelly Roll? That's a valid question. American rapper and singer. I've seen like some of him from a Nelk video. I know he got like family. He's pretty successful. Came from like the bottom economic class and climbed his way up. So you know he's experienced life, right? He's seen different aspects of life that some people can't even truly speak on based off he say she say, right? So I think he's a pretty good person to have as part of this video. So let's go.
You kind of have to be nuts not to jump into real estate, but it's not what you think.
With people
Need somewhere to live, right?
based on shared pain, shared challenges, shared hope. Today, we'll also hear from National President of the Fraternal Order of Police, Mr. Patrick Yos, about his members' work in the front line of the response.
Now, if it gets slow, I will I will speed it up. Kind of want to speed it up right now, but
Mr. Yos, thank you for your work with our office on a whole host of things, from the Helper Act and so much else. Law enforcement officers live this crisis every day in their work. One of the best ways we support them is preventing fentanyl from flowing freely through and through the communities which they serve. Mr. Christopher Urban, a veteran DEA agent, will describe the betrayal of fentanyl and its proceeds state. Thank you for joining us too. This crisis has many dimensions, including border security and public health, and demand reduction, economic stability. Everyone has a role to play. The three of you and so many others. Sadly, no single step is going to make this problem completely disappear. We know that. We aren't or shouldn't be in the business, though, of false promises. What we do is take an all-the-above approach to reduce as much pain and save as many lives as possible. Fentanyl is often mixed with other substances, including cocaine and xylazine. I'm a co-sponsor of the Combating Illicit Xylazine Act, which establishes penalty for manufacturing, distributing, and dispensing xylazine for illicit use. We should also pass my Bipartisan Power Act, which would provide state and local law enforcement with high-tech, portable fentanyl screening devices. I thank President Yo's organization for their support of that legislation. I've also demanded that Treasury hold the government.
I tried to buy some. I tried to buy like some fentanyl testing kits. It was kind of hard to find though. And then I was gonna like go around like nightlife places and be like, "Let me test what you got." You know, like blur people's face out or like have like a ski mask or something. I don't know. I think that'd be a good idea.
Governments of China and Mexico.
And then, you know, of course, they'll throw it away. Maybe get some hazards bags, just throw them away after.
Accountable for curbing illicit fentanyl trafficking. It's clear that the Mexican and Chinese governments are not doing enough to combat the flow of fentanyl. We need specific benchmarks for combating fentanyl trafficking in the opioid crisis and more information regarding the role of the recently announced Treasury Department counter-fentanyl strike force. It's vital we effectively monitor the administration's effort to stop fentanyl at its source. I call my colleagues to use their membership on committees to explore legislation, on other committees too, to explore legislation that will help us treat addiction, improve our public health response, stop the trafficking of illicit fentanyl into our communities. A crisis this massive.
Yeah, because like the human body is so amazing to me. So it's like once you get to like once you normalize something with it, like that's like addictive to where the body doesn't even know why it likes it, why it wants it. it you're gonna have to like break that habit, right? That second nature.
This
I don't think it's beatable though. Right?
Faceted demands our sustained focus. It's my pledge as chair of this committee, my pledge to the 12 million people who live in my state. It starts with getting our bill signed into law. Fentanyl, as I said, and I will close with this, passed out of our committee unanimously. It's law enforcement in all our communities.
For
Let's get this done. Senator Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for each of you being willing to testify before us today. And thank you, Jelly Roll, for the shout out on the fentanyl legislation last night at your concert. It's so important for Americans to come together around such an important issue, ending the fentanyl crisis that is devastating family after family after family. I think specifically of Alan Shaw in Charleston, South Carolina, a friend of mine who lost his son, Alan Shaw II, to fentanyl. The devastation that has ravaged the family is immeasurable. And anything that we can do as a body to make
I'm happy this is like
common sense reforms to hold those accountable and to stop the cash flow that funds fentanyl is absolutely essential that we get it done right now. And unfortunately, we're here today having another hearing on fentanyl.
stop the cap.
Because our friends on the other side of the Capitol, because of the shenanigans at the end of last year, didn't get the bill included in legislation that would have made this, I believe, law already. It is incredibly unfortunate that playing politics is still a game played in Washington, especially on something so important. And I think, as the chairman just said, he and I probably don't agree on very much most consistently, but I will say, having 22 or 23 of us vote unanimously on this committee, having 68 of us on the same piece of legislation, and not to have a chance to get it done, it's not just frustrating to those of us on this committee, those of us in Congress, it's incredibly frustrating to the people of our...
You know what sucks? Why haven't they changed it from black to brown yet on the race cards? Is it because the brown people are so low-key rich, or is it because it doesn't really matter? Because, like, black means nothing. There's no such thing as black. Black is nothing. Black is lack of something. We're brown. I think we're yellow. Everyone's just a different strain of yellow. But, you know, who am I?
Our country, who watch the devastation eat away at their communities. Congress needs to come together to stop the Mexican cartels, the Chinese chemical suppliers, and the money laundering organizations from profiting off the production and trafficking of fentanyl, resulting in the deaths of tens of thousands of Americans. Put simply, we should all value the health, safety, and security of Americans. The national death toll equates to losing the entire city of their lives to fentanyl. 75,000 Americans lost their lives to fentanyl. In my home state, that's 1,500 South Carolinians in 2022 alone. The national death toll equates to losing the entire city of Wilmington, Delaware, the president's hometown, each year, just from overdoses of fentanyl. And for every life lost, our community feels the impact. What impact? It's the mothers, the brothers, fathers, children who've lost a loved one and who try to pick up the pieces because we have a southern border that is so wide open that 48,000 pounds of fentanyl come right through it. Fentanyl's destruction has impacted every single one of us personally. I would say that probably half the room knows someone whose lives have been devastated, whose families have been destroyed because of fentanyl. But let's take a step back and look at how we got to this point over the last several years. Under this current administration, America is facing the worst border crisis in our nation's history. And the president's disastrous policies have turned the fentanyl epidemic into a national crisis. The CBP reports that fentanyl seizures have soared over 860% since 2019. Our Border Patrol and DEA are working as hard as they can, seizing record amounts of fentanyl at our ports of entry and across our country. But tragically, for every amount...
Less than 1% of people are dying. But a lot of people... It means a lot of people are savable.
seized. We know even more is trafficked on our streets. That's why we must take a two-pronged approach to addressing the fentanyl crisis. Number one, we must tackle the physical front by securing our border. That's why I've introduced both the Alan T. Shaw II Fentanyl Public Health Emergency and Overdose Prevention Act, as well as the Secure the Border Act of 2023. These bills would expedite the processing and removal of migrants illegally entering the country and properly fund and bolster security measures along our southern border. Number two, we must attack the criminal financing of the fentanyl trade by enforcing our money laundering and sanction laws. That's where this banking committee comes into play. My bill, the Fend Off Fentanyl Act, which is bipartisan, is critical to helping stop this illicit financing. I once again thank the chairman and all the colleagues on this committee for working together in a bipartisan fashion for the health of this nation. Fend makes combating fentanyl a top national security priority for the United States, and once enacted, will maximize our ability to leverage sanctions and anti-money laundering tools against illicit Mexican and Chinese organizations that traffic deadly fentanyl. Follow the money is a tried and true investigative strategy that must be employed more forcefully to combat fentanyl trafficking in the United States. Cartels and criminals that profit from our devastating losses must be stopped. And to do that, we have to hit them where it hurts, and that's their wallets. The illicit money engine needs to be turned off, and it needs to be turned off now. The Fend Off Fentanyl Act makes clear what we all know too well. The fentanyl crisis facing America is a national emergency and must be treated as a national health emergency. Americans cannot afford us to wait. I am grateful we have a panel here today that is willing to share their perspectives, their personal stories, and support.
Scott is a two-time Grammy nominee and CMT Music Awards winner. He sings about and advocates for those facing drug addiction. He consistently speaks directly with and for people struggling with addiction across the nation. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for serving your nation. Mr. Patrick Yost is the National President for Fraternal Order of Police. President Yost, through his local law enforcement career, has held pivotal law enforcement leadership roles at the state, local, and national levels, and thank you for serving communities in our nation. Mr. Yost, President Yost, and Mr. Chris Urban is currently Managing Director at Nardella and Company. Before that, he was a special agent in charge of the DEA. He's a recognized expert on counter-threat finance and anti-money laundering investigations. Thank you for your career, long career serving the public.
He looks like every crime TV show guy.
Come start with Mr. DeFord. Welcome. For your first committee hearing, I assume.
Forgive me, I'm a little nervous. I'm used to having a rock and roll band behind me when I have a microphone in front of me.
Ooh.
Check it out.
I'm cool like that. I'm cool like that. I'm cool like that. I'm cool like that.
During the time that I've been given to share my
The song kind of killed the commercial, but hey, it's catchy.
testimony here, I think it's important to note before I start that in these 5 minutes I'll be speaking that somebody in the United States will die of a drug overdose, and it is almost a 72% chance that during those 5 minutes it will be fentanyl related. Having started that way, Chairman Brown, Ranking Member Scott, and esteemed committee members, thank you for having me. I know this is a bit of a curveball, but I like a little baseball myself. My name is Jason D4, but to most I am known as Jelly Roll. It is important to establish earlier that I am a musician and that I have no political alliance. I am neither Democrat nor Republican. In fact, because of my past, my right to vote has been restricted. Thus far, I have never paid attention to a political race in my life. Ironically, I think that makes me the perfect person to speak about this because fentanyl transcends partisanship and ideology, gentlemen and women. This is a totally different problem. And I was speaking outside to the media, and I gave them a statistic that said 190 people a day overdose and die every single day in the United States of America. That is about a 737 plane. That's what about a 737 aircraft can carry. Could you imagine the national media attention it would get if they were reporting that a plane was crashing every single day and killing 190 people? But because it's 190 drug addicts, we don't feel that way. Because America has been known to bully and shame drug addicts instead of dealing and trying to understand what the actual root of the problem is with that. But the sad news is that that narrative is changing too, because the statistics say that in all likelihood, almost every person in this room has lost a friend, family member, or colleague to the disease known as addiction. I've attended more funerals than I care to share with y'all. This committee, I could sit here and cry for days about the caskets I've carried of people I love dearly, deeply, in my soul, good people, not just drug addicts. Uncles, friends, cousins, normal people. Some people that just got in a car wreck and started taking a pain pill to manage it. One thing led to the other. And how fast it spirals out of control, I don't think people truly understand. So many people. Equally, I think it's important for me to tell y'all that I'm not here to defend the use of illegal drugs. And I also understand the paradox of my history as a drug dealer standing in front of this committee. But equally, I think that's what makes me perfect to talk about this. I was a part of the problem. I am here now standing as a man that wants to be a part of the solution. I brought my community down. I hurt people. I was the uneducated man in the kitchen playing chemist with drugs I knew absolutely nothing about, just like these drug dealers are doing right now when they're mixing every drug on the market with fentanyl, and they're killing the people we love. I'll be honest with y'all, my desire is to only get older and only do better and be better. I believed when I sold drugs genuinely that selling drugs was a victimless crime. I truly believe that, y'all. My father always told me what doesn't get you in the wash will get you in the rinse. Now I have a 15-year-old daughter whose mother is a drug addict. Every day I get to look in the eyes of a victim in my household of the effects of drugs. Every single day. And every single day I have to wonder, if me and my wife, if today will be the day that I have to tell my daughter that her mother became a part of the national statistics. History repeats itself, gentlemen. Even in the 1990s, crack cocaine had long made its way into my middle lower class neighborhood. And at that moment, even as a teenager, you could have never convinced me in that moment that there would be a far bigger problem on the horizon in the form of a pharmaceutical drug. And then I watched opioids and Oxycontin burst onto the scene. I'm here to tell y'all that fentanyl is going to make the Sackler family look like saints. And I want to let y'all sit with that for a second. It is time for us to be proactive and not reactive. We were reactive with crack, we were reactive with opioids, and y'all are taking the first step at somebody in Senate finally being proactive. I truly believe in my heart that this bill will stop the supply and can help stop the supply of fentanyl. But in part of being proactive, gentlemen and women and ladies, I have to be frank and tell y'all that if we don't talk to the other side of Capitol Hill and stop the demand, we are going to spin our tires in the mud. Y'all are taking the first step, but I encourage you to take it outside of this room and you take it to your colleagues and your constituents and you give them the...
And of course, we have to drop like a program after, once you make people aware, right?
Most that you can. I know I've got a few seconds here, and Senator Brown said I may or may not go over. All I want to say is that I not only encourage y'all to do this, I encourage y'all to take it a step further. At every concert I perform, I witness the heartbreaking impact of fentanyl. I see fans grappling with this tragedy in the form of music that they seek solace in music and hope that their experiences won't befall others. They crave reassurance. These are the people I'm here to speak for, y'all. These people crave reassurance that their elected officials actually care more about human life than they do about ideology and partisanship. I stand here as a regular member of society. I am a stupid songwriter, y'all, but I have firsthand witnessed this in a way most people have not. I encourage y'all to not only pass this bill, but I encourage you to bring it up where it matters, at the kitchen table. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. DeFord. President Yost, welcome.
Thank you, and good morning, Chairman Brown, Ranking Member Scott, and distinguished members of
The kitchen table. That made me hungry. But yeah, I mean, if your family members going through it, then yeah, I would. The interventions normally happen at like family dinner.
this committee. I want to thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to provide a law enforcement perspective on how we can step up our efforts in the fentanyl epidemic that is killing Americans at an alarming rate. In 2021, more than 100,000 Americans died from drug overdoses, 65% of which have been attributed to fentanyl. According to the National Institute of Drug Abuse, overdose death rates exploded between 2015 and 2021 by nearly 750%. Fentanyl and fentanyl analogs were found to be the main driver in drug overdoses. The U.S. Drug overdose death toll in 2022 is estimated to be, was estimated to be at 110,000, primarily from synthetic opioids like fentanyl, making them the leading cause of death of Americans aged 18 to 49. Drug cartels use precursor chemicals sourced by China to manufacture pills that are intentionally made to look like prescription medications like Oxycontin, Percocet, and Xanax. The Drug Enforcement Administration estimates that of these fake pills, 40 to 60% of them are often bought on social media and are laced with a deadly dose of fentanyl. Taking just one of these can be lethal. Have partnered with state and local law enforcement agencies, DEA analogs, yet the death toll continues to rise. As law enforcement officers, my members are on the front line, and they know firsthand just how devastating this drug epidemic is in our communities. We're typically the first to respond to a 911 call about a potential overdose. Our role goes beyond just interdiction and enforcement. We help preserve the sanctity of life. Many, but not enough, officers have access to Narcan, a life-saving medication that can reverse the opioid overdose if given in time. Law enforcement officers and other emergency medical responders likely save hundreds, if not thousands, of lives across this country every single day. Sadly, law enforcement officers experience every facet of this devastating drug. We work to stem the flow of fentanyl into our communities, to capture and punish those who deal the drugs, to save the lives of those who overdose, and when tragedy strikes, we deliver the news to the families of their loved one that was killed by this poison. We recognize the nature of the threat that our country is facing. We must do more if we're going to end or mitigate the deadly impact of fentanyl and fentanyl analogs in our citizens. We need a fully comprehensive national strategy to reduce overdose.
Yeah, we all understand it's bad.
has murdered hundreds of thousands of Americans, destabilized Mexico, destroyed communities, and harmed the interior measures needed to combat the massive threat of fentanyl and other
This is the
narcotics
DA
trafficking.
guy.
This drug poses an enormous threat to our homeland. It has murdered hundreds of thousands of Americans, destabilized Mexico, destroyed communities, and harmed the integrity of our financial institutions. Significant new tools, including those in the Fend-Off Fentanyl Act, known as the Fend Act, are needed to address it. I witnessed the damage done by organized crime and drug trafficking firsthand during my 24-year career with the DEA. We targeted leadership of transnational criminal organizations that were trafficking drugs into the U.S. and laundering crime proceeds through U.S. financial institutions. In 2018, I was assigned to DEA's Special Operations Division, known as SOD, where I formed a team that was focused on a new and evolving threat, Chinese money laundering organizations, known as CMLOs. Achieve greater profits more quickly with less risk than more traditional forms of money laundering, such as the black market peso exchange. Delivered the funds sells those U.S. dollars to Chinese customers who want to spend money in the United States. This money can be used to fund investments, acquire real estate, cars, pays college tuition, and purchase chips at a casino, among other things. These Chinese customers pay a broker in China for the cash they purchase within the United States. Funds received by brokers from customers in China are used to buy goods for export to Mexico or another country where transnational criminal organizations operate. Once those goods arrive in Mexico or again another country used by transnational organized crime, they are sold and the proceeds are delivered to another Chinese money laundering broker, and in this example, Mexico, and it returns the money to the funds they had already advanced to the Mexican transact facility. It exploits the fact that financial institutions and other domestic recipients of Chinese origin funds are unfamiliar with Chinese money laundering networks. That said, the scheme has several potential vulnerabilities that are not being fully exploited, but could be with the aid of the Fend Act and other changes. Unlike some traditional money laundering schemes, proceeds never leave the U.S. and can be frozen or seized.
I want to trade stocks. That's like a hobby. But I also have to get over the fear of gambling and taking risks. It's hard. It's hard. But hey, I've done it before.
Seized. Financial institutions, transnational criminal organizations, and Chinese money laundering organizations maintain detailed transaction data that can be exploited by law enforcement with the aid of targeting analysts and data scientists. At my current employer, Nardello & Co., I'm helping the business community understand and combat the threat posed by the cartels and their enablers. But more federal guidance, more sanctions, more enforcement activity, and more resources are needed. The Fend Act addresses each of these needs. Thank you for your time and consideration. I look forward to answering your questions.
Prices, almost every form of drug that has came across since the 80s. And I grew up in a household that had multiple addicts and alcoholics in that household. I have seen drugs from an early age, and I can tell you that every alcohol I've seen and every drug I've seen, nothing has held a candle to what's happening with fentanyl in the United States of America. I'm seeing people shatter. I'm seeing families get broken. I'm seeing, like I spoke about in my speech, it's important to note that the real victims there's a quote that says, the addict isn't the only person in the family that suffers from the symptoms of the addiction. The entire family suffers with the addict. The entire family rallies around the addict and carries that. The addict is not the only victim in this. It spreads far.
Thank you. Most of us up here can't sing all that well, but what we can do is legislate. What kind of signal would it send to the people you talk to who struggle to feel heard and seen if we come together in both houses, as we have in the Senate, 23-0 here, and then the Senate floor? If we can do that in the House, what kind of signal will it be sent to the people whom you're fighting for?
It's immeasurable. It's immeasurable because from the outside looking in, we don't see nothing happening in D.C. except fights. All we see is war and all we see is division. And it makes us feel unheard and unseen. And it makes us feel like our problems will always get caught in the middle of some kind of a partisan issue. And you and Senator Scott coming together and this committee has taken the first step that I think could be the beginning of the change that is needed in America, not just D.C. Because this isn't the only bipartisan bill that needs to be spoke about. It's the mountain in front of us. But there are many mountains behind that one that must be spoke about too. And I applaud y'all for taking the first step. Because me being here, I know for sure that some of my people are watching this right now. And for the first time ever, we feel heard. The voiceless feel like they have a voice in Washington, D.C. today. And I carry that with pride as I stand here with y'all.
Thank you. President Yost, tell us about how this crisis affects your officers, your FOP members, and other officers, both the physical threat of toxic exposure and the psychological burden of dealing with overdoses and really the devastation caused to families and communities by fentanyl.
Our inner circle has been around since 2015. We put out a ton of money, done a ton of deals. Our people are successful. We're going to get you.
Sorry. Senator, it really is a two-part. One of them I'll talk just briefly, and that is just the potential exposure of our members themselves to these poisons, just in our normal enforcement of it and coming in contact with it. But I think really the one that we I guess maybe underestimate. Law enforcement officers are human. We struggle with a lot of things as well, and this repetitive trying to fix the problem, trying to assist those that are overdosing, and then having to deal with the families after to carry this tragedy back to them. We're human, and it takes a toll on us.
I wonder if they're gonna repeat all we just watched for the next 2 hours. I get like they're not gonna like start doing raids in the middle of the thing, but it's like, or start exposing leads, but it's like, yo.
As well, and it's happening over and over and over and over.
I'm still
And that repetitive effort, repetitive action to our members, it certainly takes its toll on the mental being of law enforcement officers as well. It's time to get a handle on this. Every single day. I mean, what makes a crisis? Is it 1,000 people a day? Is it 500? Is it 110,000 a year? Because that's what it was last year.
You said our police officers from Toledo to Athens, and thank you for saying that. Mr. Urban, you described better than I've ever heard sort of the follow the money. Senator Scott and I, when we talk about this, both of us have talked about principally you follow the money. China and Mexico, you've talked how that money makes its way into all three societies so well. What is in the last minute or two? I'm sorry for not giving much time. How does fentanyl? How does it unearth that? How does it attack that? How does this bill help us follow the money?
So it's offensive operations against the money laundering networks. Certainly in my career, following the money was what led me to success against transnational organized crime around the globe, whether it be Russian organized crime, Hezbollah, Mexican cartels, Colombian cartels, what have you. But FENDAT itself, and the common theme I've heard is unite as a country. What I suggest is during my career is imposing justice on our adversaries. It was always satisfying and rewarding bringing those traffickers to justice, whether it be in the Southern District of New York or elsewhere. And in terms of the FEND Act itself, sanctions can impose costs on the Mexican cartels. Sanctions, aggressive sanctioning, a platform set up. Sanctions usually take historically 6 to 9 months with an indictment. The FEND Act, with the funding and the focus that I see behind it, you want to go something more like 4 to 6 weeks without an indictment. So you want to act with speed against our adversaries, whether they be the Mexican cartels, the Chinese precursor facilitators, or the chemical companies itself. The AML and compliance, the additional oversight will allow law enforcement to connect the dots. And I can get into data targeting later within AML and institutions will allow law enforcement to target these networks better.
Thank you, Mr. Urban. Senator Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Start with you, Mr. Urban. You mentioned WeChat and WeChat Pay and the role that it plays in moving the money around. Can you expound upon that a little bit?
So I want to talk about WeChat and the example I gave, and that it allows for speed and trust within the network. So never in my career with the DEA has a criminal organization had the benefit of an encrypted global network that they could communicate on. And what I mean by trust is U.S. law enforcement does not have the ability to intercept WeChat. We can't wiretap it. So if you compare that to 10, 15 years ago when I ran an undercover money laundering team to attack the black market peso exchange, you could wiretap the network. You can't do that with WeChat. The speed that I talk about, and an example I gave earlier in my opening remarks, these transactions or communications happen within a day. It used to take 7 to 10 days, but WeChat allows for that speed because it's trusted within the Chinese money laundering network to communicate. They can rely on the person they're speaking with is a person that they can rely on to complete that transaction. Or again, the black market peso exchange was mistrusted, and they enforced the movement of money that it would flow through violence. You don't have violence. The Chinese money launderers have absorbed all the risks. But in terms of WeChat, that's an encrypted application that, whether it's additional legislation or a negotiated strategy within our executive branch of the government, we need to be able to impact WeChat so it's not a benefit to the Chinese money launderers.
Thank you very much. That's such an important part of the conversation about how money can move around without total anonymity, total privacy, and a very rock-solid system that eludes or evades capture and law enforcement in our country. And I'd love to have a deeper dive into solutions for that as we have an opportunity to talk later on as well. Thank you very much. Jelly Roll, quick question for you. As you know, your family in Charleston, the Probsts, are very close friends of mine. I called them just to, hey, tell me about Jelly Roll. The one thing they said was that He is authentic, he is sincere, and he speaks about the issues that has impacted his life.
Yes, sir.
And as a kid who grew up in poverty, I will say that sometimes the unseen and the unheard feel invisible. And one of the things that you're doing today is you're making visible those who still today feel like because of who they are, where they live, or what they do, they are somehow invisible. The challenge, of course, with drug addiction is it doesn't know a class or a race or a place. It's everywhere. Can you talk about the fact that, indeed, what we're talking about today impacts across all segments of our society in a devastating way?
Senator Scott, thank you. I was hoping to share this, so you bringing it up means a lot. I have the opportunity to go sing at dozens of rehab facilities a year and dozens of jails and prisons. Every time we do a show in a city, we go to their local jail or their local rehab and sing songs for them to encourage people. And in rehabs across America, I can tell you with certainty, I have seen everything from governors' children's in the same rehab as kids that have been homeless since they were 12. I mean, when I tell you that this drug, it has finally reached to the point, like I said, that we used to look at addicts and shame them, but now it's hard to because the rest of the world's finally realizing that the addict is actually their nephew. It's their cousin, and they know their cousin was a good person. They know that this isn't the actions of the cousin they know. They know this is the actions of the drugs. Senator Scott, Chairman Brown, I assure you that this touches every single human, white, black, every ethnicity, every race, everywhere in the United States of America. It is touching and hurting people and killing people. And that's why what y'all are doing is so important. It's bringing people together. It's making the unseen fiends felt seen. The voiceless have a voice, and we can't thank y'all enough for it.
Thank God that Congress can come together, not in a bipartisan way, but in a nonpartisan way to address the issues and the challenges facing Americans all over this country. And I certainly hope that my friends in the House are paying attention today, because it not already being law is a travesty. I certainly hope my colleagues on the other side of the Capitol will take up this fend off fentanyl and get it done.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Senator Menendez of New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think in order to combat the fentanyl crisis, it's important to understand how these opioids are getting into the country. Mr. Urban, is it accurate to say that the vast majority of fentanyl trafficking comes into the country through official ports of entry?
Most of the fentanyl comes through official ports. It usually comes across the Mexican border, most of the fentanyl coming into the country.
But through official ports of entry?
Most of it, a majority of it probably does, yes, sir.
Yeah. Here's the facts. In 2021, over 90% of fentanyl seizures occurred at legal crossing points. Just 279 out of 1.8 million arrests by Border Patrol of illegal border crosses resulted in fentanyl seizure. So it seems to me that in the first place, if we are serious about it, one of the elements of this challenge is stopping fentanyl from coming into the United States. We would significantly increase resources to combat the flow of fentanyl across the border. We would think about dramatically enhancing our technology capability at those official points of entry where the vast majority, the 1.8 million arrests were taking place. And that would help us dramatically stem the flow. In order to make real progress in the fight against fentanyl, we have to hold foreign governments, such as China and Mexico, accountable to their commitments to crack down on producers and traffickers of synthetic opioids. In November at the APEC summit, China and the United States announced the resumption of bilateral cooperation on counter-narcotics, but we need more than words at this point. Mr. Urban, from your experience, what has China done to crack down on Chinese pharmaceutical companies that manufacture fentanyl and fentanyl precursors?
Snap your W-2 and file your taxes 100% free with TurboTax Free Edition. Roughly.
Yeah, a little sleepy, but it's like, how to say this? I'm waiting for, like, there's some juices in here that we're missing.
There's been limited, action within China from my perspective since I've left government in terms of doing that. During my time in government, I did not have insight within China in terms of what they were actually doing. We had certainly an office within the embassy there for DEA, and it had limited cooperation with Chinese law enforcement. We're trying to build that relationship at the time.
How about Mexico? What have they done to crack down on the drug cartels that mix fentanyl with other drugs and smuggle them into the United States?
So I think in a very difficult situation concerning the cartel's power and reach and ability to corrupt Mexican government components, they've done to some degree what they can under the circumstances, but it's been very limited in terms of their ability to counter or negate the ability of the Mexican cartels to traffic fentanyl here.
And these are two of our big challenges. The answer to both questions, in my view, is not enough. I appreciate that President Biden raised this with President Xi when they were at that summit. But this is why in 2019 I introduced the Fentanyl Sanction Act, which provided the U.S. government with tools and resources to sanction illicit traffickers and producers in China and Mexico. And why last year I introduced the Strengthening Fentanyl Sanctions Act to expand and extend those authorities. We have to try to reach abroad as well as we deal with issues domestically and put pressure on them. And certainly the Fentanyl Act is a very strong start. But I think there's other things that we can do as well. Lastly, I'd like to echo the chairman's support for the Fentanyl Act. It's a bipartisan bill. It authorizes practical and common sense steps to hold bad actors accountable. It builds on existing laws to better combat the flow of illicit opioids into the United States. I'd like to highlight a provision that I got into the bill that requires the Department of Treasury to report on actions taken by the People's Republic of China with respect to persons involved in the supply chain for fentanyl and fentanyl precursors. We can't not solve the fentanyl crisis within our borders alone. We have to address the international components of the supply chain as well. And do you believe those provisions of the bill, of the Fentanyl Act that reaches beyond our borders, are important as well?
I think they're critical. I fully support your statement that we have to essentially attack these networks outside the country to help protect the country. The sanctions component that you spoke about, and that's also in the Fend Act, is something that needs to be used.
Most of it's coming out of the country, so definitely it's going to be a lot of probably military bus, DA bus, border patrol bus.
More offensively and in greater in scale, and I mean dramatically greater in scale, with speed. So again, versus 6 to 9 months in indictment, which takes a long time and a tremendous amount of resources, you want to dramatically increase the scale and the targeting and sanctions tool against these networks, whether it be Chinese precursor chemical facilitators, the chemical companies themselves, or anyone that's helping to facilitate this within Mexico, which is a variety of different components, sir.
Thank you. I hope our House colleagues will move quickly. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator. Senator Tillis of North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. DeFord, where'd you grow up in Antioch?
Sorry, I grew up between Priest Lake. I lived in Priest Lake for a while. Are you familiar?
I grew up in Trailer Park on Richards Road. Went to Antioch High School.
Really?
Class of 78.
Yeah, we lived off. I was born in Bavaria Apartments off Haywood Lane.
I think they call it Country Meadows now.
Yeah,
right there.
I lived in Country Meadows at one point. It's right next to Apollo Apartments, right next to Pop's old car wash.
Exactly right.
Yes, sir. I'm very familiar with that
Apollo
trailer
Junior
park.
High School. I also had friends who got convicted for drug trafficking, and had one commit suicide after substance abuse really took his life. But one thing I've noticed, one thing you said that I think is very important, you said you see a lot of fights up here, and there are, but there's some good stuff that happened. And one that I hope I can get you updated on is a bill that we passed last year called the Safer Communities Act. Because I'm sure you know, if you looked at this the way I have, a lot of the people who are in addiction are self-medicating. They get there because they have behavioral health problems, they have trauma problems, they have a lot of challenges. We passed a bill last year on a bipartisan basis. Some of the folks on this committee voted for it, Others didn't, but it's working very well. And it's helping expand behavioral health access. And we need help educating states like Tennessee, where I spent a lot of time. Now I live in North Carolina, so that while we continue these fights, there's some good stuff that came out of this chamber on a bipartisan basis that will save lives. So we won't spend time educating you on this, but I'd love to have the opportunity to educate you on this so that we can make sure it gets implemented well in Tennessee. I'm doing my part in North Carolina. But thank you for being here. I look forward to the opportunity to speak with you separately.
I'd be honored. I believe that mental health and drug addiction go hand in hand.
We have this bill that in a pilot form, and one of the states that implemented about 7 years ago, we had a 50% reduction in mental health incarcerations. 50% reduction statewide. That says a lot about folks getting vectored into care that really makes a difference. So I'd like your help on promoting that, and look forward to meeting with you. I also think we have to talk about the border talk. There is a fight going on right now on border security, and this is why you should be concerned with it. It looks like a fight, but we have cartels making about $1 billion a year, charging people a fare to get across the border, anywhere from $5,000 to $55,000 to come across the border illegally. They are making, according to the DEA, somewhere on the order of $1 billion a year now, and they are plowing that money right into poisoning our country. They have these things called the Sinaloa Air Force, where they're taking ultralights and landing, coming across the southern border, landing, dropping off drugs. Senator Menendez is right. The majority of them are coming through legal ports of entry. Part of that can be fixed by technology, but a part of it can be fixed by actually having Border Patrol patrol the border and legal ports of entry versus being engaged in the millions of people coming across the border illegally. We have to realize that we have to fix this, and we have to interdict more drugs, and we do have to hold China and Mexico more accountable. Mr. Urban, the China, we have to continue to pound the drum that China is poisoning over 100,000 people a year, and as Mr. DeFord said, about 70% of them are likely dying from fentanyl. But what more can we do to disrupt the money laundering? The cartels, the Mexican cartels don't launder money the way they used to. Now they call 1-800-CHINA, and they have a global network where they're laundering this money right before our very eyes. What sorts of policies should we take up to make that more difficult and disruptive?
So I think there's a couple of components there. One is we need to understand that we have home field advantage when it comes to money laundering. And what I'm talking about specifically within the domestic United States. Those bulk cash proceeds that I spoke about earlier are right here at specific points in time, but they always start right here within the United States. So we need to attack the networks and the money, and what I'm talking about specifically within the domestic United States. Those bulk cash proceeds that I spoke about earlier are right here at specific points in time, but they always start right here within the United States. So we need to attack the networks and the money. It's the proceeds we don't focus on enough. That's where the Mexican cartels and Chinese money launderers are vulnerable, right? That's where they're vulnerable. So in terms of attacking those networks, we need additional AML compliance and oversight.
Because my time's limited, Mr. Yost, I'll submit some questions for the record for you, because there's also a public safety issue with law enforcement I'd like to get to. We're not going to have time. But isn't it also going to require, I'm not necessarily big on regulations, but if we don't start figuring out the use of crypto and digital assets as a way of of really masking the laundering activities, I think we're going to miss a lot of what's going on. Do you agree with that?
So I certainly agree that crypto needs additional oversight and AML compliance. It's one component of the money laundering cycle that I spoke about.
Okay. Well, thank you all. Mr. DeFord, I am sincere when I say it looks like we lived in the same trailer park, but we also have a common background, and I'm very, very serious. I need help educating people, not once and done. What we do here is you pass a bill and then you hope something happens. I want to make damn sure what happened in the 5 states that implemented the Safer Communities Act happened in Tennessee and across the country.
Yes, sir. You have a friend in me. I'd love to talk.
Thank you.
Mr. Ford, though it's not obvious, he graduated a few years before you did. Yeah.
It's also obvious he might be the only person in here as Southern as I am.
I don't think so, actually. Yes, the guy sitting to your left and a few people up here. John Tester isn't one of them. Senator Tester from Montana.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Brown, Ranking Member Scott. Yeah, you haven't heard from Senator Kennedy yet. That's coming. I want to, first of all, thank the Chairman and Ranking Member for their leadership, not only in having this hearing, but also in the bill, the Fentanyl Act. It is long past time that this bill get passed. I think that Ranking Member Scott said it right. The shenanigans in the House need to stop. And we need to get some stuff done. I had a bill on China buying farmland. They stopped that. Wrong thing to do, but for probably political reasons they did it. But why they would stop this makes no sense to me. We need to categorize fentanyl as a natural reason. I need to stop that this bill get passed. I think that Ranking Member Scott said it right. The shenanigans in the House need to stop, and we need to get some stuff done. I had a bill on China buying farmland. They stopped that. Wrong thing to do, but for
who you cannot let them buy property in our country. What the freak? That's insane. Like a civilian that's like immigrated, like not the country, not like the government. We gotta do that in a bunch of other countries. We need more territory.
Probably political reasons they did it, but why they would stop this makes no sense to me. We need to categorize fentanyl as a national emergency that it is. We do need to hold China accountable for its role in this crisis, and we need to give law enforcement.
A financial crisis would devastate more people, losing control of one country to another. Like China is like a overpopulated. Like isn't the whole country of China ran like a city area, like an overpopulated city area. And it's like, it's either a cop or you probably do like a very simple job. No. I take like the job part. I don't know that too much, but no. The freedom, no.
Border.
It's a first world country ran like the people have jungle brains.
Agents the tools that they need to be successful. And in that regard, I want to thank each and every one of our witnesses for being here today and for your testimony. I think it's really important. I want to follow up a little bit on what Senator Tillis was talking about on the cash. Okay, the Fentanyl Act is a bill that we passed here, bipartisan, nonpartisan, big numbers, and the House screwed it up, which is what they tend to do most of the time anyway. But the cash issue is not something that we've talked a lot about, and the money laundering issue isn't something we've talked a lot about. You started to answer his question. I want you to finish that answer on what we need to do on this side of the dais to have some impacts on the money laundering aspects.
Thank you, sir. So I was touching upon additional AML compliance at financial institutions. They need additional oversight, and they need to better track with suspicious activity reports what's transpiring with Chinese money laundering. In addition to that, I think there's a tremendous opportunity with data. Right? You can pull the data that I'm talking about that's on WeChat. So we go out, DEA goes out and does 10 arrests on a Chinese money laundering cell. If you pull all that data in from search warrants, judicial...
The triad is scary, though. Try to mess with the triad. Or like, what are those other, like, Chinese... This is real, bro.
Process on laptops, phones, and elsewhere. You can normalize that data and kick out targeting packages immediately to the field.
Hey, I'm a simple man.
Right, so we're missing that opportunity with speed. We need to impact these organizations with speed. So in terms of funding and approach, there's an opportunity with data to go after the Chinese money laundering networks. The last one is the encrypted app that I talked about with WeChat. We have to be able to surveil and intercept that.
Let's go back to the ML. You're saying this money laundering, a fair portion of it, is going through our banking system right now, our regulated banking system?
That's correct. When the Chinese money laundering organization sells the dollars back to a Chinese customer that wants to invest or spend money in the States, the day before, those were the proceeds of the narcotics trafficking that we're talking about. So it is going into the system, yes.
Do you love boating? Well, Freedom Boat Club makes boating easier than ever. At Freedom Boat Club, we buy the boats and you enjoy them. Here.
Drop a dub if I should get a boat. It's a lot of work. My dad likes to fish, though.
Here's how it works.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Yos, I want to thank you for your support of not only the Fentanyl Act, but the Anti-Drugs Act that I have. You talked in your testimony about the impact it has on your fellow police officers handling this poison. And I have two questions. Number one, from a on-the-street standpoint, talk to me about how the Fentanyl Act will make a difference.
Well, Senator, I think the age-old problem that we will all have and we'll have after we leave, and it'll be on our next crisis, is that criminal enterprises are operating at a pace that is much further than we can make decisions and fix these problems. I think the Fentanyl Act is so very important because it gives us extra tools in order to be able to combat this. But the reality is this is just going to be the first step. Yeah. This is an evolution, and in order for us to have any meaningful impact, we need to do two things. And it was spoken here earlier. We got to operate at a faster pace. There's no reason whatsoever there's anyone here in Washington should be against finding ways to save and protect Americans from something that is clearly a crisis. And we need to stop. It needs to move at a much faster pace if we're going to keep up with those people that we're trying to combat. The other side of it is that it's frustrating to one being overloaded trying to deal with this crisis.
One of the quickest ways to bring awareness, drug testing tips. I mean, they hand out condoms in school like it's candy. You might as well start hanging out drug testing kits. Like, so simple.
Crisis. We're trying to manage it with the manpower that exists, adding all of the other challenges that we have in law enforcement associated with it. And that is something that's always going to be a challenge. It's always going to be outpace what our resources are, and something that we need to give some attention to. But I think this bill is a huge step in bringing us in a direction, give us some tools in order to be able to take as long as we have, it's profitable to do this, we're always going to be behind. We got to find a way to be able to break it up. And I think when it comes down to really following the money, regardless, it's always going to evolution. It's always going to evolve. There's always going to be new challenges for us. But I think we have to find a way to at a much faster pace be ahead of it. And this bill certainly puts us in that right direction.
Mr. Ford, I'm out of time, but I just want to say thank you very much. Your testimony was incredibly powerful, and what you do every day to impact lives for the better in this country is something we need to take notice of. And I don't know if you've ever been to Montana, but anytime, any place, you're welcome to come up because I think your message needs to be heard all over this country, including rural America. So
yes,
thank
sir.
you.
I'd love to see you there.
Oh, I'm going to Montana. I'm going to add that to the bucket list.
Thank you. It's a pretty state where you live. It's a pretty state where you live.
Oh, man, it's heaven.
Senator Kennedy.
Or you Google it. Let's see. Oh, yo, what? Yo. Oh, I want to see one of these things in real life. Oh, never mind. That's not. Oh, here he goes. Freaking. Yo. If I could pet one of these without dying, that'd be crazy.
Louisiana is recognized.
Candidly, gentlemen, there's not much that Congress can do to make President Xi stop his country from producing the precursor chemicals. I've met with President Xi personally in Beijing.
Oh, bro, okay, this is getting good. I'm happy to stick it out.
I don't think it did much good. And candidly, there's not much the United States Congress can do to make President Lopez Obrador in Mexico stop the cartels. He knows what's going on. There are two things that we can do. First, we, meaning Congress, we can secure the border. It's an open, bleeding wound. And it is wide open. And it is wide open by design. I've seen it. Most of the members of this committee have. That's not what I want to talk about.
We still need a workforce, though.
The other thing that Congress can do is crack down on the dealers. Not the addicts, Mr. DeFord. The dealers. Now, Mr. Urban, see this pencil?
Yes, sir.
This pencil tip, the amount of fentanyl just in a pencil tip, as represented by a pencil tip, will kill you dead.
Don't gaslight it. Don't do that. That's like a fear tactic, which can bite us in the long run. But to a very weak human, yes. A very inexperienced, very unexposed human, yes.
Dead as fried chicken, Mr. DeFord. Oh, that's Southern enough for you. You see this? 40 grams?
Yes, sir.
This will kill every man, woman, and child in Culpeper, Virginia. Not far from here. If you have this much fentanyl, you're a dealer.
Yeah. You haven't seen people carry it. That's a lie. No, the dealer usually has that much in the movies.
This is
or the rich guy.
400 grams.
Oh!
This will kill every man, woman, and child.
That's a whole pot of dumpling. right there. That looks like flour.
In Knoxville, Tennessee. Now, you're a dealer. You're not holding this much fentanyl. You're not dealing. Now, 40 grams. This will get you, you get caught, a minimum of 5 years. Okay?
Sheesh.
400 grams, you get caught with this much. Enough to kill every man, woman, and child in Knoxville, and many more before you step on it. This will get you 10 years. Remember, there's just one problem. We punish other drugs less severely than we do the most powerful drug, fentanyl. I mean, just look at it. 40 grams, 5 years. 400 grams for fentanyl, 10 years. Methamphetamines, 5 grams will get you 5 years. 50 grams.
Well, we make those drugs, like, yeah, it's like someone can easily get addicted from it naturally and then get it out the streets, so it's kind of like, yeah.
Grams will get you 10 years. Much less severely than fentanyl. We do the same thing for PCP. We do the same thing for crack cocaine.
Oh, that's definitely not medicinal.
What you allow, gentlemen, is what will continue. Now, I support the
But I
Fentanyl
am not messing with those people.
Ratification Act that we talked about today, but I also support something else. I support another bill, the Fairness in Fentanyl Sentencing Act. And it would lower the 5-year mandatory minimum threshold from 40 grams of fentanyl to 2 grams. And it would lower the 10-year mandatory minimum for 400 grams to 20 grams. And we ought to pass it too. What you allow is what will continue. I'm going to yield back, Chairman Brown, my 14 seconds to...
Yeah, because this is not even something that should be used recreationally. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, it just brings nothing but death.
To make up for my past transgressions.
It doesn't, but that's fine. Senator Warner.
It does. Never mind. I take that back. Anything. That was a very. I just think it's a coincidence he said that, but I can't say such a definitive thing. That's like no. Yeah. That's a slap on the wrist. Hold on. Put the camera back on. Can't be definitive.
Virginia. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got to tell you, I think my friend from Louisiana makes a very powerful point, and I agree with him. Was a little concerned that you cited examples of how many folks died in Virginia and Tennessee, and you made no analogies to Louisiana communities. But it is we see this on the intel side. It's not exactly like they got great quality control, and a few literally the equivalent of grams of sugar misplaced can make the difference between a drug experience and a death. And I know other colleagues have raised, not going to be the direction I'm going to go today, but I see, as chairman of the Intelligence Committee, how often, and I don't start with a huge bias against crypto, and I think there are distributed ledger opportunities, but boy, oh boy, the amount of times that crypto is used as a way to have these illicit payments made is something we've got to grapple with. So I thank my friend from Louisiana. I'm going to start with a slightly, maybe a little bit lighter note, because I want to acknowledge Mr. DeFord and personally thank him. I know you were in Bristol, Virginia recently for a concert, and that you actually went next door to Abingdon and saw the softball team and kind of cheered them on. I'm grateful for that. And I know you recently as well were closer to Richmond in experiences you felt, particularly with some of that prison community in Chesterfield.
The HEART program, sir, is what it's called, and that sheriff down there has really got his hand on what he's doing. There's another sheriff in Flint doing great things that are similar. He is focused on rehabbing drug addicts in jail. It's actually the only jail in the United States of America that will allow you to come in without a crime. If you are just a drug addict that wants to get off the streets and no rehab will take you and you are indigent, they will allow you to come into that jail and join the HEART program to get
That's pretty cool, because rehab, I heard, is expensive.
Sober. And I think that's incredible. But, sir, I do that as often as I can. And
It's like a very simple, cheap way to, like, control the person and not let them access it by their own free will.
All across America. And the saddest part is you just see the same thing. You just see heartbreak and despair. But yes, sir, that was incredible. And I appreciate you bringing that up, because that guy...
Self-control is so hard. Like, it's something we learn as a baby, and adults is the reason why we indulge in recreational things like alcohol, hobbies, things you do as a kid, right? That's why, and like other states, marijuana, mushrooms, etc. So you keeping control of that inner child, that baby, those survival instincts that you're like born with and you develop into more, is what you have to realize is when you break the line of like consistent habit to like addiction. In from my perspective, from what I've seen in the years.
Chesterfield really has his
based off of history.
That sheriff really has his hand on the pulse of what's happening in America.
Well, thank you for being willing to share your story.
Respectfully, not for a pat on the back, but we also donated our proceeds from the show that night to them. We cut the Chesterfield County Jail, the HEART program, I think a $30,000 check.
Well, so kudos to you, thank you, and also for maybe less prevalent, but visiting the softball team in Appleton.
I was cheering for him, man. I paid for him to go to the championship. I'm always going to be cheering for him.
Well, grateful for that. On a more serious, well, it's all within a serious note. I want to turn to your colleagues up here. I'm chairman of the Intelligence Committee, and one of the most important tools we have in the Intelligence Committee is part of FISA called Section 702. I was recently just in Israel, Jordan, Saudi Arabia. 702 is being used not just daily, but almost hourly in our efforts in helping our Israeli friends ferret out some of the Hamas leadership. But 702 is also been critically important in exposing the role that the Mexican drug cartels play, and frankly, in exposing the active engagement of the Chinese government. I know my clock's ticking here. Everybody involved in the drug battle against this killing drug realizes 702 is a critical component. It's going to expire in April. Senator Rubio and I have put forward a broad bipartisan reform bill that protects Americans' privacy.
Here's one thing you need to do before buying anything online. Don't spend another dime on Amazon until you watch this first. Watch this. I can show you.
Eliminates the ability to use any of this information to pursue any kind of criminal charge. Changes remember 702 is one foreigner talking to another foreigner abroad. There may be inadvertent contact with Americans. My clock's ticking down, but gentlemen, Mr. Urban, if we were to lose that...
Yeah, my social battery's running low. I want to go back to indulging in the arts. So, let me see. This isn't breaking up by timestamp. I should apply there and they should pay me to do this like part-time. But let's see what happens.
702 capacity.
Let's see how much longer I can last.
What would that do?
I've been speeding this up the whole time anyways.
In terms of our ability to give you the kind of enforcement tools you need against the bad guys.
Senator, the short answer is it takes a very important tool out of our toolbox in order to be able to combat this crisis.
Mr. Urban?
Yeah, I second that. We're already at a disadvantage targeting the cartels in terms of gaining intelligence.
Search warrant form.
Great in drug trafficking. And if I get to what's causing this, the fentanyl is being made from Chinese precursors. It's coming into Mexico where it's manufactured there. Then it's being smuggled across our
illegal Chinese people.
Southern border. In fiscal year 2023, Customs and Border Protection seized 26,000 pounds.
Like it's coming from like a legal Chinese factory, like
fentanyl at the border. And that's only the amount that...
Like COVID? Damn it. I take that back.
We're catching. Senator Menendez talked about the amount that we're catching at the ports of entry. Well, that's where we have sophisticated equipment to screen. But what's evident is with the rising death toll that we've got, more and more of this is flooding across our border, beyond the points of entry. And we've got to use our resources across the entire border to stop the flow of fentanyl. I'd like to come back to you, Mr. DeFord, and to your experiences here. Here in D.C., I think there's often a disconnect between what's happening in the bubble of Washington and what American citizens are actually experiencing across the country. I think your unique experience can help bridge that divide. I was very touched by your opening remarks, and in particular, your comments about addressing the demand for fentanyl as well as the supply. We're here talking about a bill that addresses the supply, but I would love to get your perspective on how we might...
It's more of like we target like why people do these, and we promote those things, like just better distractions for people, and like just reinforce other stuff like that. You know, find not placebos but replacements. You know, things people can move on to. I think that would be very healthy. Like instead of fighting people who have violent tendencies, we have things like boxing, professional martial arts, UCF, you know, and people who are more chill and creative. We have public arts. As you get older, we switch it up. We change to like paint and sip. Then there's just so much to it, you know, and there's things out there that took multiple lifetimes to create and master and build to what they are still to this day. So therefore, in our current lifetimes, there should be plenty of things to, entertain us and distract us. Long as it's feasible, of course, right? Feasible is a very, very big part of it.
Might address the demand. I know you've thought a great deal about this.
Yeah, it's first of all, it's incredible to meet you, Mr. Haggerty, Senator Haggerty. Being a Tennessean, I am very, very respectful of all that you've done for our state. Not only do we have the second biggest mortality rate in Nashville, actually it was the second most dangerous, deadly metropolis in America for fentanyl behind Baltimore. I had a meeting with our mayor about it recently, and just to the actual demand of it, I think there's not a proper education about it. I don't think there's enough resources for people to learn about it. There's not enough affordable rehabilitation centers in the state of Tennessee. These are all things I'd love to talk about. I think we're scheduled to hang out with each other soon anyways, and I would love to discuss with you, but I live in a very juxtaposition here where I understand the drug dealer and the addict because I have played the position of both. And unrelated, but to Mr. Kennedy's point, I agree with you, Senator Kennedy. I believe that chart is about as ass backwards as it could be, excuse my language. But Mr. Haggerty, I thank you for asking. And I only said that I see this bill as truly helping stop the supply. But as always, the problem with Capitol Hill is that's a bunch of y'all in here.
What chart?
Rehabilitation centers in the state of Tennessee. These are all things I'd love to talk about. I think we're scheduled to hang out with each other soon anyways, and I would love to discuss with you, but I live in a very juxtaposition here where I understand the drug dealer and the addict because I have played the position of both. And unrelated, but to Mr. Kennedy's point, I agree with you, Senator Kennedy. I believe that chart is about as ass backwards as it could be, excuse my language. But Mr. Haggerty, I thank you for asking. And I only said that I see this bill as truly helping stop the supply. But as always, the problem with Capitol Hill is that's a bunch of y'all in here fighting to fix half the problem, and we do have a whole problem here, Senator Haggerty.
Well, I look forward to continuing our discussion about that when we meet together later today.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited.
Next, I'd like to talk about the way we deal with the sort of violations that take place with respect to fentanyl. On December 16th of 2022, Attorney General Garland released a new DOJ policy that restricts the charging of crimes with mandatory minimum sentences and discourages prosecutors from charging the most serious, readily provable offense. The DOJ soft on crime policy states that, quote, it applies with particular force in drug cases, which include fentanyl traffickers. So my question, Mr. Joseph, to you is, what happens to law enforcement morale when prosecutors either refuse to prosecute or they minimize penalties that are sought for drug crimes, including fentanyl crimes?
Well, I think there's a bigger picture here, and that is that the majority of violent crime in every community is committed by a small percentage of people, and certainly the drug trade.
That's certainly what the sheriff and the chief of police of Memphis told me too. They know exactly who they are.
So so when we're able to apply pressure and take people off the street who prey on the people within our communities, we have an impact on the quality of life in the community. When we're unable to do so, then we see the problems that we see in a lot of cities across this country. It is a challenge for law enforcement to put our efforts into trying to make our community safe, only to see a revolving door of the criminal justice system. It's something we've been speaking of for quite some time. At some point, we need to recognize that what we're doing is not working. You apply enough pressure, it eliminates some of this criminal activity, and quality of life goes up.
I'd like to just make one very simple point very quickly here. Does the failure to strictly enforce drug crime laws tend to increase or decrease drug overdose deaths?
I think it's connected to every part of crime within a community, quality of life within a community. To somehow suggest that recognizing the damage that's being done by the drug trade within our areas and view it as a nonviolent crime is.
Chinese companies sell the chemical ingredients used at every state in Massachusetts, and crypto helps fund that death toll. Crypto plays a role at every stage in the illicit fentanyl trade. Chinese companies sell the chemical ingredients used to make fentanyl to drug cartels, and they get paid in crypto. The drug cartels and the traffickers sell their deadly drugs in the darkest marketplaces, and they get paid in crypto to the tune of about $1.5 billion in 2022. And drug kingpins buy weapons and cars and make payoffs, again, using crypto. Now, the Trump administration's DEA spotted this problem 5 years ago in their...
I lost a lot of money to crypto hackers. Like, you would think I never had a job before or worked a day in my life.
Their 2018 threat assessment, they said that cryptocurrencies, quote, offer traffickers a relatively secure method for moving illicit proceeds around the world with much less risk compared to traditional methods. And since then, the problem has only gotten worse. Take one case. Last year, the Department of Justice indicted a Sinaloa cartel member who laundered nearly $900,000 in crypto by directing their U.S.-based drug couriers to deposit cash straight into the cartel's crypto accounts. And what did they then turn around and use that crypto for? They reinvested in the cartel's fentanyl factory so that they could pump more fentanyl into the United States. Now, Mr. Yos, thank you for your work and for the work of hundreds of...
They said we're going to grow the business. We're scaling up.
Thousands of police officers in the United States who are on the front lines in the opioid crisis. You've seen the various tricks that drug traffickers use to move their drug money around. So if I can, let me ask you, why do you think cartel members find crypto such an attractive option?
Well, Senator, thank you.
Why won't these people just
Thank you for those comments. And I don't portray myself to.
Is it even really that easy to sell drugs? Like why? It's like they can't exist, right? If they don't exist, then like why would cops exist? Type of shit, right? Like there's just, if you think too deep about it, it's like, yo, why? Or I'm ready to play Fortnite right now.
Be an expert on crypto.
Fair enough.
But I will say that I think what we see is an evolution. That evolution is crypto today. It's going to be something later. I think it's just the next thing that we have not. It's in law enforcement. We follow the money. It just makes it harder to follow the money. So I think the fact that it's emerging. There's a lot of things that we still need to figure out about this, and I think that's what the appeal is to it. We're a little behind in
like what's after fentanyl. Well, that's what we should be looking into.
Truly understanding how to use it in a way that helps us combat crime.
All right. So, Mr. Urban, you have decades of experience at DEA following illicit fentanyl funds. Why do you think crypto has become so attractive?
It allows for speed.
So you can move it fast,
Yes.
unlike cash, which you've actually got to physically carry.
It's larger. You physically got to carry it. It's much more difficult to conceal.
Okay.
So there's speed. There's to some degree anonymity, and then they can hold that asset and transfer and move that asset easily.
I love cash. It's fun. It's like playing with Legos.
So they're exploiting the organized crime, the Mexican cartels, the lack of compliance and oversight within the crypto industry.
Just a lot easier to hide it. Is that basically what you're saying here?
It's easier to hide. Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So, make no mistake, drug traffickers are also still moving cash the old-fashioned way. But crypto has changed the game by allowing criminals to move boatloads of money instantaneously and nearly anonymously. No need to try to stuff $900,000 in cold hard cash into a suitcase and worry about whether some customs agent will spot it.
Because it makes it even harder for them to get robbed unless they're like a hacker. So then it's like, I guess the government could just rob like crypto people. Damn. Wish I kept that going. That's like that cybersecurity thing now. I get headaches. I feel like I should be a talker. I should be a spokesperson. I should be doing what I'm doing now, right? Yeah.
Now cartel members can move as much money as they...
The hacker's life is going to be at threat. Me, I'm just a talking guy.
want using a handful of crypto wallets. Holes in our anti-money laundering laws have given drug dealers a backdoor to move their dirty fentanyl money around, and that backdoor is wide open, and it's helping fuel the opioid crisis at home. Mr. Yost, if cartels and drug dealers and Chinese chemical companies can keep exploiting the holes in our anti-money laundering rules and keep funding the fentanyl business with crypto, what's that going to mean both for law enforcement and for families across this country?
Senator, it's not a matter of can. They will.
They will.
They will, and they do, and they will continue to do it until we find ways to close those gaps.
All right. Well, it is about closing the doors, and that's why 20 senators, including 7 right here on the Banking Committee, are working to pass a Digital Asset Anti-Money Laundering Act that closes these loopholes in our money laundering rules. Crypto shouldn't get a free pass, and I look forward to working with all of my colleagues to finally fix that. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Senator Vance of Ohio is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask for personal approval for 10 seconds?
Yes, sir.
Is that okay, JD? One of my staff members and colleagues is leaving for the private sector, Mary Kirshner, and she's done an extraordinary job for the people of Louisiana and the American people. She's here today. I wanted to recognize her and thank her for her service. Thank you, Mr.
On that positive note, I'm going to exit here. All right, y'all. Well, with what they said, which of course you could just slow down to normal speed, right? And then when I talk, just speed it back up. I played it on mostly 1.25, 1.5. Might suck that I said this at the end, but I put it. Oh, look, someone put him in the chat. I didn't realize. I always miss it. I need a second phone. Yeah. I totally miss. This is like, I do it when I'm playing the game stream too, but yeah. 1.25 speed, 1.5 speed is when I'm talking, so you could slow it down. I mean, speed it back up from when I'm speaking, and then keep it at normal. No, keep it at like 0.75, 0.5 if they're talking too fast for you. So hopefully you got that, right? I'll repeat it one more time because I'm live and I can't edit this. 0.5, 0.75 to slow it down to normal speed, the natural speed in which the video was spoken, and then 1 point, and then mine's gonna be normal, so you don't even have to speed up. Take care, y'all. Like and subscribe for more.